Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Life Stories Unscripted podcast. I'm your host Viviane and I'm a doula, mama coach, and a breastfeeding specialist, and I talk about everything related to preconception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and everything in between. So if you're a parent or you're trying to be one, this is the podcast for you, so stay tuned. Today I'm talking to Andrea Gullick from Brisbane, who is a mama of 3 and a professional speaker, and together we'll tap on her amazing birth story and powerful motherhood journey, so stay tuned. If you like this podcast and you've seen some previous episodes, please hit the subscribe button now so me and you can share Andrea's story together. As usual, this podcast is sponsored by Perfecta Placental in Beverly Hills, which is a placenta preserving company. So if you would like your miracle organ to be preserved and get 2 amazing gifts in the form of a stretch mark cream and a diaper bag, don't forget to use my promo code DoulaViviane. And for more information, I can be reached either via LinkedIn or Facebook under my name, Viviane Shima, or via my email address, which is birthwithviviane@gmail.com. I'm excited to hear from you. Let's dive into Andrea's story. Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here today. It's such a pleasure to have you. I'm really, really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. It's always such an honor to be able to have these type of conversations and really explore in depth different things that are obviously close to both our hearts. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me.
So, Andrea, why don't you tell us who you are? What was your birth story and what was your experience?
I am a mum of 3. So I have a nearly 19-year-old son, a 16-and-a-half-year-old son, and a 10-year-old daughter. And all I ever wanted to do was to get married and have children. That was by far my highest aspiration. I didn't really think about a career. I didn't even really think about travel or any of those things that I guess a lot of people, younger people, might sort of lean towards. And I was fortunate enough that I, at 21, met the farmer of my dreams, because I wanted it to be a farmer. So I did a really great job at manifesting everything that I wanted. And at 23, I think I was 23, we got engaged and then got married when I was, no, got married when I was 23, engaged at 23, married at 23, and first baby when I was 24, nearly 25. So in terms of my fairy tale, like the princess riding off into the, not with her knight in shining armor, it all came relatively easy in that way. And so just anticipated that life would continue on like that. And my first birth, like many, I guess, was somewhat complicated. And it was a 20-hour labor. And I was transferred from one hospital to another because I had been fully dilated for a number of hours and Bobby wasn't moving. So they transferred me with the belief that I would be taken to a bigger hospital to be Caesared. However, when I arrived there, and I'm not sure how the system works in different countries, but we have public and private health care here in Australia. And at that stage, I was in public health care, which means that you just get whatever doctor comes in. And so he decided that he could deliver my baby by forceps, and so proceeded to do that. So I was taken off to theatre, given an epidural, and proceeded to have my baby delivered by forceps. And I guess because I had been in so much discomfort, I didn't necessarily recognize what was happening to me and to, more importantly, my baby. So because my husband wasn't overly keen on really seeing anything that was going on, they had put a white sheet up from my chest above so that he couldn't see. And every time that the doctor pulled on the forceps, I would actually slide down the bed underneath that sheet and then come back out again. And then he would pull again and I would slide down and I would come back. And then there would be more cutting, slide down, come back, until my baby eventually was born.
When you said that the doctor decided to use the forceps, did he ever discuss it with you? How you feel about that?
I had I had said to my husband I didn't want to be Caesared. I was actually quite nervous about being Caesared because at that point in time, I felt like to have gone through the labor for such a long time and then to be Caesared, I'd be so exhausted. And so that actually made me quite nervous. And I guess if I had have known, although you don't know until you're there, the degree of difficulty it would take to bring my baby into the world, and if I was able to actually grasp the concept that I would be pulled down a bed with a pair of tongs around my child's head, then maybe I would not have chosen that. But there wasn't any discussion. There was just that this is what he felt was best, and so he would do that. And so at that stage, because I was quite young, I went along with that.
Right.
The pediatrician that was called in. So the next day, so baby was born, everything's fantastic. I saw him for maybe a minute, and then he was whisked off, and I went into shock and things like that because I'd lost quite a lot of blood. And then I was taken onto the ward, and my husband finally went home, and Bobby was put into the special care unit. And being the first time mum, I didn't necessarily feel like any of this was out of the norm. And so then the next morning, so got to bed at maybe 4:30 in the morning, and then at 9 o'clock the next morning, the pediatrician came around to do his rounds. He had a nurse with him, and they just pulled the curtain around. I was completely on my own, and he just proceeded to sort of just fire stuff at me that he's going to be in a special care unit, he's going to have to be monitored, we're going to have to do an ultrasound of his brain, he might seizure, and just literally just flew all of this information to me. And all I really heard was ultrasound his brain and seizures, and my head was just racing. Like I was literally like, what is going on? And that's primarily what I said to him. And I just asked, like, what is the worst case scenario here? Like, what are you trying to tell me? And he just looked at me and said, is your baby going to die? Is your baby going to have brain damage? Well, I can't answer that. And he left. And so here I was, literally not even 12 hours after giving birth, after a pretty horrendous experience, literally being told that my baby could possibly have brain damage or wasn't going to survive, but a doctor couldn't answer that. There was no compassion, there was no empathy, there was no concern for my emotional or mental welfare in hearing those things. It was just so cold and so non-emotive that when he left, I just burst into tears. I was petrified of what information we'd just been given.
Did he ever ask you how you feel entering the
Never.
room?
Never, 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 never.
And you know what? When you said that he brought in the nurse with him, it's almost, he brought someone with him, but he didn't quite empathize. Well, what about you? You are all alone. Is there someone you can confine in, after he'd tell you? All these thoughts, he probably didn't occur to him, but it occurred to him that I will take someone with me. But you were a 12-hour mom, a brand new mom. You've never done this, and you're right. I mean, you said it just quite perfectly, that there was no compassion, no empathy on his side.
And I'd really hope that he didn't have any awareness around how his actions would have felt, because if he did have some awareness around it and still did it, then that's just unforgivable. I mean, basically the way that he dealt with me is unforgivable, but but I guess you can let people off the hook for just being like, they deal with this stuff every day. But if he literally knew that this was going to be confronting and distressing and then just continued on, then that's completely different. But the nurse was a gift, really. Like, I'm glad that he brought her with him, because she actually returned a short time later, and she actually had a photo of my baby in his humidity crib, and she literally just sat down and just explained that because of the birth and because I'd been fully dilated for 6 hours, there was concern that there could have been a lack of oxygen. And so every baby has the possibility of seizuring, but he was a higher candidate because of the birth, and they were just doing all precautionary. And that's all I needed. That was all I needed, was for someone to say to me, this is why we're doing this, instead of leaving me with absolute terror in my own mind to try and work out what was going on. So we got to that evening. My husband obviously turned up, and our family and stuff. And, I guess nobody really ever envisages that their dream come true of becoming a mum for the first time is going to be overshadowed by ringing people to let them know that you've got a baby and he's a little boy and 8 pound 15 and his name's Geordie. Well, we're not 100% sure if he's going to have brain damage, so we'll get back to you when we know more. Like, it's just not what you anticipate is going to happen. So that was probably how we spent our first day, really, having people come and visit, and they would go and visit him in the special care unit and visit me in bed, because I couldn't really walk based on how many stitches and the trauma on my body. And then that evening we had a registrar come in and told us that the ultrasound was fine. That was not a concern, but they had detected a lump in his tummy. So that's all they said, that he had a lump in his tummy and it needed to be ultrasound. But the hospital we were in, which was a bigger hospital than what I was meant to birth in, didn't have the facilities to actually scan what was in there enough. So he would be flown to a major city hospital the next day, but they didn't have a bed for me, so I wouldn't be able to go. So the next day he was all bundled up, and the neonatal aeroplane came and picked him up. We could only see him into the ambulance, the road ambulance, because I was just too, I couldn't actually even get to the airport to see him off. So the rest of our family all went out to the airport and watched him fly off, but we stayed back at the hospital together and spent that night without our baby. And then we drove to the hospital by ourselves the next day. And when we arrived in Melbourne, we were taken into a small room where a pediatrician was there, and he was the one that told us that they suspected that he had neuroblastoma, which was a malignant tumor the size of a grapefruit in his abdomen, which is primarily why the birth was probably so difficult. But we didn't actually know that he had that. It wasn't detected in his 18-week scan. So everybody, doctors, us, everyone was flying blind. Like, no one knew. So then that started the 5 weeks of 3 weeks, of being in the hospital until his blood pressure was under control, before he started chemotherapy when he was 8 weeks old, and then had surgery when he was 10 months old, and went into remission and has never looked back. So, there's so many blessings that we can take away from all of that. And, the doctor, the pediatrician that I had that spoke to me so rudely. Right. There was ongoing stuff with him during my son's treatment, where he actually went against protocol and really honestly could have harmed my child had I have not spoken up about it. And so that in itself was a very interesting journey to have to deal with somebody who had such a lack of empathy and compassion for a person's journey. That, you know, when we bring babies into the world, it's such a confusing, and it can be, I should say, a confusing and unsettling time. But to then lump cancer on top of that, and to have someone that you have to deal with that has no bedside manner, and like, I'm not even sure why he was practicing, to be 100% honest with what I went through with him. I have no idea why he hadn't retired.
Right.
Because he was actually a really horrible person to deal with.
Andrea, what made you speak up?
A gut instinct that it didn't feel right. And because I was probably young, and because I think society makes us believe in a lot of ways that people in authority know better than us. So I understand that we need to have some sets of rules and things so there's not anarchy, I guess. You know, when I say authority, like, I'm talking, yes, we're made to respect police officers, and they have authority over what we do and don't do and things like that. And there's principles that make sense in a society to maintain order and things like that. Although I think if humans were left to be happy humans, I don't think we'd need it. But that whole concept of the fact that someone goes to university, someone is quite intellectual, so quite intelligent, and they go to university and they study and they have a lot of knowledge, that is actually somehow superior to the basic instinct of, I want to say mother, but I believe parents, but I think we have instincts in different ways. And we had been told what the protocol was for our baby, that when he had chemotherapy, and because it decimated his immune system, there's only a couple of indicators of you being unwell, because obviously your white blood cells don't produce what they need in terms of pus and stuff like that. So it was very much 37.5 degrees Celsius. We're in Celsius. I'm not sure if you are, but
yes, we are.
You are. So 37.5, and we had to go straight to hospital, like the hospital that was half an hour away from us. We were not allowed to go to the hospital where he had his treatment, which was 2.5 hours away because it was too dangerous to travel that far. 38.5, and he had to be administered antibiotics straight away. I fed my baby and went back to bed at midnight, and at 1 o'clock a nurse came in and just woke me up and said, we did his obs at midnight. He actually is 38.5. We've rung your pediatrician and he said it's okay, you're going to Melbourne tomorrow, just let him go through. And she left the room. And so for the next couple of minutes, I literally wrestled with, he's the doctor, he knows best. He must have some other information that I don't have. I can't question him. He's the doctor.
Right.
And my stomach, my gut just kept like almost like scratching at me of, this doesn't feel right, Andrea. This doesn't feel right. And I thought, well, all I can do is go out to the nurse and ask if I can ring the main hospital, and I'll just check in with them. And so I went out, and, you know, I was so nervous because then at that age and my personality type, I was so intimidated. But she was so lovely. She couldn't have thrown the phone at me any quicker if she tried, because I found out later that she actually knew that what had happened was wrong. But as a nurse, she can't override the doctor. But as a parent, I could. And so she was just hopeful that I had enough in me to actually question it. And I did. And so that all it was a gut instinct of, we've been told one thing and this does not line up with what we've been told, and it's my baby's life.
Right.
So if I get it wrong, and this was the thing in terms of who I was, that even though the pediatrician was horrendous after the birth, like he was just a pig, in my mind and heart was, if he is the best doctor there is, and this is just a personality thing, I will suck it up and put on my big girl panties and I'll just do what has to be done and deal with what I have to deal with. Because if he's the best person for my baby, then so be it. But he proved to me that he was not the best person for my baby. And so we were lucky enough we were able to get rid of him. But it was purely gut instinct. This doesn't feel right, and I'm not going to just sleep here and have my baby possibly in jeopardy. So
You did it.
I did.
You did
I
it.
did.
How did
And
that
yeah,
feel after you stood up for yourself and for your baby, and then they actually found out, like you said, that he went against protocol? How did that feel to you?
I guess initially I was so intimidated by him that it just felt so uncomfortable. And I guess I was so upset that I was put in that position, because I felt like we had enough going on and all he had to do was play by the rules.
Right.
And so he came and did the rounds the next morning, and our baby was really sick and our baby was crying. Like, he's only about 8 months at this stage. And, he still proceeded to say, oh, well, his temperature went up, but I was happy to let him go. But somebody intervened with that, and still was sort of coming at me in terms of the decision that I'd made. And I just said to him, my baby's not okay. It's as simple as that. My baby's not okay. And I'm not okay with that. So we had the nursing unit manager come in that morning when she found out what had happened and spoke to us about putting in a formal complaint about it, because it had been such a misconduct type of thing. And I just said to her, I'm happy to do that as long as we don't have to have him as our doctor, because I'm not putting in a formal complaint and then having to actually have him as our pediatrician. So we were lucky enough that another pediatrician that accepted us, even though he didn't have to, he accepted us. And so we were able to basically sack the pediatrician, put in a formal complaint, and move on. And I guess in a lot of ways, I'm someone that believes in everything sort of happens for a reason, even if you can't understand the reason at the time. And I guess the continuation of my story was that everything turned out okay for our first son, and he went into remission, and we had another baby a couple of years later. And then 8 months after he was born, my husband was actually killed in a car accident. So, and for me, in terms of looking at the whole situation, the pediatrician that we ended up with was the most amazing man and the most amazing pediatrician and doctor. And when my husband passed away, my son was on yearly checkups. Like, by that stage, he was on yearly checkups. And our pediatrician reined them back into every 6 months. And he said, this has got nothing to do with your baby and me needing to check him. And it's got everything to do with me keeping an eye on you. And because a happy mum and like a stable mum is going to be the best thing for this little boy. And so I just know that if we had have had the first pediatrician and I was still under him when my husband died, I would never have got that type of support or that love and that compassion. And so as hard as it was to go through what I went through, I feel like the universe was almost creating the situation that I needed further down the track.
So exactly. So you can stand up, so you can grow yourself. And possibly when having more children, to know what to expect and what is normal and what's definitely not normal and not okay, and differentiating between those two.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, like, as challenging as it was, it created contrast. It created the contrast for me to know that's not okay and that is. And so and really our second pediatrician was very much about how I felt things were going. He was very much what I believed in at the time and what I grew into because of the situation that overrode really what I knew to be right. Like to be able to see a pediatrician or a doctor come back to what do you think and what do you feel? How do you feel your baby's going? And putting it back into me having a voice and me having a say and valuing as the mother what my opinion was, what my observations were. And then that's what we need more of.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to tap on a little bit more on what you said, that you need to create a contrast. And I still think that to this day, a lot of mothers, they don't get to experience the contrast. And some mothers are very lucky. They're blessed, obviously, with wonderful pediatricians, wonderful birthing experience and outcome, and postpartum care for the mother and the baby. But like you said, not everyone has a situation like this. And, you, on top of that, dealt with a sick baby, a very special baby. And that's not easy, especially if it's your first baby. And like you said, you were young and you just didn't quite know what to expect or what was the norm. But I think there's so many blessings in your story. I mean, what you went through is, I can't imagine that, but I think there's so many blessings to where you are now.
Yeah, and I guess it might seem strange for me to say this, but like I'm grateful for so much of it because it really did make me who I am, and it really did help me realize that we know instinctively much more than we are told or made believe that we know. And I remarried and we had a daughter together, and I did hypnobirthing and planned a home birth, and there were reasons I couldn't birth at home, which in the end weren't that wasn't actually overly, not that it wasn't true, but it wasn't necessary for me to go to the hospital, but at that stage we thought it was the best thing. But just realizing, like really honestly realizing, Viviane, that it's such a natural thing for our bodies to do, and that it's such a beautiful and empowering experience to be able to create a baby and grow a baby and birth a baby. And it really is only the fear that is spread through society that clamps us all down and clamps our bodies so that it can't open up like this beautiful flower. Because as I was growing up, I never actually ever sat anywhere with a group of women that talked positively about their birth. It's always and obviously I haven't either. Obviously the story that I share sounds awfully confronting, to be dragged down a bed and stuff like that. But that was a particular medical situation we didn't know about, which happens. But on the whole, a beautifully healthy, growing baby inside a beautiful, growing, healthy, nurturing mum, we don't need a great deal of assistance to bring that child into the world. And if we can get rid of the fear around what it's going to be like and embrace the discomfort, because for me, the birth was there was discomfort with it. But like my two next babies that I had, I didn't have any assistance. I didn't take any drugs. I didn't have any gas. So they were natural. And it was uncomfortable. Yeah. But if we could actually really begin to honor the process of what it is and what a gift it is to bring these babies into the world and celebrate it, I think there would be a lot more women that actually just want to have babies because of how empowering it is.
Absolutely. No, you said it so wonderfully, Andrea. I second it, and I could not have said it better than you just did. There is one book that I read, and they say in nature, all the nature books about animals say do not interrupt. Do as much as needed and as little as possible when an animal gives birth, because that's how it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to interrupt. A mother is a mother, or a woman is a woman, because she has the body to birth and to grow and birth a baby, and she has the power to do it on her own. Yes, sometimes there are cases where she really needs help, but it can be done all natural. It can be done like, little push here, little push here, and the baby turns, and we are all attuned to that. And I think that hospitals or the healthcare system, they try to look at it from a medical point of view. They try to, I don't even know the word for it, but you captured it perfectly, Andrea, that it's supposed to be natural. It should be natural. And it is empowering, because you're stepping up to the highest level possible that you as a woman can reach to grow a baby and to give birth and become a mother.
I think it's like, as we're talking, the word that keeps popping into my mind is that the inconvenience of birthing has become the issue. The inconvenience of how long it takes, because when you're in hospital, where tick, 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 it's an inconvenience that a mother might need to labor for 8 hours or 10 hours, and in some ways, because of the way in which society has moved to value different things, giving birth can be an inconvenience for some women. They want the baby. And so then we go into like why we choose different things, because we want to be the least inconvenienced. And yet it's the greatest gift. And like that inconvenience, I'm thinking about it now. Women used to stay in hospital for 7 days. It's inconvenience to have women in a hospital being cared for while they get used to becoming a mother. So we rush them out after a day or two. Some women even leave on the first day, which is totally fine if that's in alignment with who you are and you're in that space to be able to go home and continue the nurturing process. It's not a one hat fits all, but there's definitely been a movement into this is an inconvenience, so we need to speed this up.
Right. Absolutely. And some mothers, they come into the hospital and they're not even admitted yet, and doctors are already saying, let's break your water, let's speed this up. My question is, why do we need to speed things up when everything is going like it's supposed to be going? There is no like you said, discomfort for the mom to indicate an intervention is needed. The baby is not distressed. And I think exactly this, what you're saying, the inconvenience of a prolonged and extended stay for the mothers, that's what can make things worse. And it can actually stall the actual birth and distress the baby, distress the mom. And like your doctor said, if the mom's okay, the baby's okay. And the mom needs to be 100% so the baby can be 100%, so she can give 100%.
Yeah. And, this is a thing that, not all situations are the same. And so I'm not actually saying that it's an inconvenience and this is why everything happens like this, because realistically, if I didn't have some sort of support when I was birthing my baby, even though forceps weren't the right choice, really, and I should have been cesared, I was never going to be able to birth him. He was never going to be able to get in the right position. Like his whole left side of his abdomen was like concrete. So you can't really get into a fetal position when half of your stomach is rock solid. So there's always going to be those scenarios and situations where a natural birth is going to need to be supported, but not at the rate of which there's intervention now. And I think we've just moved so far away from nature in so many ways, because nature has the answers. Allowing the natural rhythms and the natural movements and the natural way of being in birth, we've just moved away from that because we think we know best, but you can't out-know nature. You just can't. Nature just knows what to do.
I agree. Again, I couldn't have said it better than you did. I think we did move away from nature, and I think we should attune. I think there are a couple steps to that. I think it's acknowledging, it's being aware that it's natural, normalizing it for the society and community that birth is a natural process. It's not a medical process. It's not a big medical intervention. And I think that's how society looks at it these days. A lot of births are not being respected in the way of let things happen. And then interventions happen, and then everything else happens.
Well, when I had my daughter, and I was going to say before, like if we even look at conception, you are literally at the, what was I trying to say? Like we're at the mercy of nature.
Yeah.
We don't choose to ovulate.
Yeah.
Like we don't choose to ovulate. Yes, you have to obviously be in a relationship where intercourse can happen. I understand that that's a choice. But in terms of the possibility of a pregnancy occurring, that is down to nature, and allowing that and knowing the rhythms and the cycles and the time. It doesn't just happen anytime you have intercourse. It has to be at certain times, because that's the way that nature works in terms of that really knowing. And I guess this is such an important thing that I want women, people that want to be mums, are mums, and things like that, to really know is that we know what to do. Our bodies know what to do, and that how empowering it is to really trust in that. Because my third child, so my daughter that I was planning to home birth, because I couldn't home birth in the end, because my private midwife wanted us to go to hospital because I had blood stuff going on, which was fine. But I had spent 2 weeks leading up where I would get contractions or tightenings at night if I was on a ball and whatnot, and then they would go away, and then it'd happen again. And I was getting so frustrated because I was still trying to want to control it a little bit. But it got to the point where I had to go and see an obstetrician and things like that, because I was going into hospital, which I hadn't done the whole pregnancy. And because I trusted myself and in what I knew, I didn't do a gestational diabetes test. I'd had 2 babies before, and I just knew that I didn't need to do that. I didn't do any of the swabs for different things because I just knew that we would be okay. So all of the rules they want us to play by, I broke every single one of them, because I'm like, I'm not doing that. I know I don't need to do that. And so going into then a hospital to see an obstetrician, I'm knocking on the door of my due date, and he wants me to have a gestational diabetes test. And he wanted to do a stretch and sweep, and he wanted to do all of this stuff. And I was just so like, this does not have to happen. What is going on? And even my midwife said, you're going to have to play the game a little bit. You're going to have to give them a little bit to ensure that they care for you adequately, because you need to go to hospital. Now, that's like red rag to a bull for someone like me. That you expect me to give into what I believe is right for me, to get adequate. Like, what is this system that we are in? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So she just said, and then he was going to, if I hadn't had her by the Friday, this was the Monday, if I hadn't had her by the Friday, which was like 2 days after my due date, if you can classify a due date,
Right.
he was going to induce me. And I'm like, there's no hope in hell that's happening. I'm not being induced. But again, my midwife was like, well, you're going to have to play the game or do this yourself, Andrea. You and your baby know what to do. You need to talk to your baby and tell her, because we knew it was a girl, that we're going to do this on our own terms. And so I went and had the next day, I went and had acupuncture because I'd heard that can actually, if it's the right time, it can help.
Yeah.
And that night when the tightening started, I went to bed and it was still happening. And I literally laid there and spoke to my baby. And I just said to her, we do not have to do this the way they're telling us. We have got this, you and I, we can do this together. And my waters popped. And that was it. It was game on. And I'm like,
wonderful. Absolutely. Wow. Like this is out of the world magical, I would say. And I love what you said, like what Andrea you went from to the Andrea you're today, that you said, no, this is not happening. I don't have to do this. This is absolutely unnecessary. And I love it because it gave you power and you knew you had a choice. And that is the number one word I use, choice. You do have a choice in every situation that you are in your life. You always have a choice. And you have more than just one. Every time you have more than just one. And it's so wonderful and beautiful and empowering and just powerful that you knew that by the time you were growing your third baby in your belly. And just going against, not going against, but standing your ground and telling the midwife, no, this is just not happening. And telling the doctor, this is very unnecessary. And listening and attuning to your body and truly listening to it and not let anyone else tell you this is not how you're feeling. Actually, this is what you're supposed to feel. And if you're not feeling that, something's wrong with you. So let's just do it our way. So we are protected without giving a second thought to how you feel and whether it's good for you, because every mom, every baby is different. Every birth is different. Who knows what, might have worked for mom A doesn't have to work for you. It can be actually harmful. And I love that how I can see the change you've went through, and it's beautiful.
and it's funny because when you're talking about, like, when you said going against and like not going against, because this is the thing, we have been made believe that to follow our own truth is to go against somebody else, and it's not. It's like it looks like that because we haven't been guided in trusting our own natural instincts on what is best for us. And if you get to a point where you don't actually know what is best, then you can ask for advice, you can ask for the options. And my best advice, my absolute best advice in terms of birthing is exactly what you do with being a doula, is that find someone that you connect with and form that loving, trusting relationship throughout the birth. So they are your sounding board. If you get into birth and you are a bit confused, that you have that person who has your best interest, not what time is it, how long has it been going, like a person that has your best interest and what you want front and center, because the hospitals and the doctors for the most part don't. The number one thing that I would say is cultivate a trust within yourself, cultivate a trust within your body, and cultivate a trust between you and your baby. And after that, then cultivate a trust with another trusted person, whether that's your partner, whether that's a doula. And then as a last ditch thing, then trust the medical system. Then trust them.
Wonderfully put. And yes, I agree and I second that. We're not going against, but we have been made believe that this is going against, but it's actually just walking next to them, staying true to ourselves, true to our core and our baby and our bodies. And we as humans, we forgot how to listen to our bodies because we are cornered or pressured into this new philosophy of life that don't think about yourself. Nuh-uh. Don't just push your emotions aside. Keep busy, eat some chocolate, eat some ice cream. Just stay happy. No matter what it takes, just stay happy.
Buy some new shoes, build a bigger house, go on a holiday. Just don't sit with your shit because, no. We need to be happy.
And it's just filling this void, which can be filled and eliminated with just pausing, just asking myself, what can I do? What do I need right now? What is it that would make me feel better?
And I guess knowing and believing that birth can be beautiful and it can be calm and it can be empowering. And really, I guess it is up to women really to share stories that are positive and beautiful and encouraging, because we didn't go on to have a fourth baby because we didn't want 4 children but I was devastated that I wasn't going to get to have a fourth birth, because I really wanted to be able to birth another baby because I loved it so much. With my first was a bit of a write-off, that's fair enough, but my second and my third babies were so empowering, and so I just think it's one of the most magical things women can do, and to have it so tarnished in fear and scaring each other into how horrible and terrible it is. It's like it's not. It's really not.
Right. Absolutely. And then there's all these sorts of things that come up during pregnancy, things that you heard and learned and picked up on during childhood around pregnancy and birth, that birth is scary. It does hurt. And just wait for the pain, No. And then that's why I believe that doulas are very important, and every mother should have access to one, and every mother deserves one, because doulas are there to help them overcome these fears and really just false beliefs, because like you said, it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that, but our brains are very, very powerful into believing into something that doesn't have to be necessarily true. It doesn't have to be clinically supported, but if we have learned it early on enough in our life and childhood, it sticks. We create around that. We create around the fear, and we become victims. We go from empowerment to disempowerment, and that's exactly what we don't want to do. We want to go from disempowerment, if anything, to empowerment. And to do that, you need to go from victim to creator. So again, just asking yourself and acknowledging, first of all, the problem, or that there is a fear that is limiting me in having the most amazing birthing experience I can have, to asking myself, what can I do? How can I change this to achieve what I want to achieve? And just the thinking, and then you start feeling a certain way, and then how you feel creates partially the outcome, right? Because if you're going into birth with fear, well, how is it gonna go?
But even on a physiological side of things, like if we think of fear and what it does, it like fear, it tightens everything, it constricts everything. Now your body is trying to open up so that a baby can be birthed through the pelvis. So it makes sense that the more relaxed you are, the more calm you are, you're going to be working with your body, not against your body. And in terms of fear and what it does, and how we've been almost programmed to believe what birth will be like. There's like 7-8 billion people on the planet. We're humans. We're humans that live on this planet, and we're humans that birth. If birth was a set way, then everybody would experience the same thing.
Yeah.
Now we've got people on the planet that give birth in a rice paddy, probably feed their baby, put them on their back, and get back to it. If birth was, if you like, if it was that painful and that destructive to us, then why aren't we all experiencing the same thing? But there's certain people that don't have time to think about how much it's going to hurt, or what they're going to do, or how long they're going to be laid up from childbirth, because they just have to get back to doing what they're doing. And so there has to be something that's happened to a part of the world that are now, it's such a medicalized situation, when there's other people in the world that it's just a natural thing that we do, and we continue on. So
Beautiful. I love
take
it.
that for what it is, I guess.
It's such a wonderful thought. I never really thought about this in such depth, but yeah. I mean, if someone is able to have a wonderful birthing experience, if it's just one person, what is preventing me from having the same? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
And that's not to say, like, in terms of that, because I'm very much about empowerment, that's not to say that if someone doesn't, that they've got anything wrong, because that's another belief we don't want to embed. But opening up to the possibility that you too could have that opportunity, and how do you put yourself in the absolute best position possible to experience that, without any expectation of how it must play out, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, yes, it does. It makes perfect sense. We can feel empowered, and we can control our body and own it, make it as beautiful as possible. I think prevention has a lot to do with that. So you're right. Find that person, find your anchor, and create a wonderful, life-lasting relationship with them, and let them guide you with the thought of what I said earlier: help as little as possible and as much as is needed.
And see, that's the thing, like when you talk about empowerment as well, it's someone could end up having intervention and a Caesar, and it still be a really empowered situation. It comes down to knowing that you are part of the equation, and your opinion and your choice matters, irrespective of how the baby is born. I think it's when we just become like they just tell us what has to happen, and we just have to roll with it. That's not being empowered.
Yeah.
But whether it's with you or whether it's with your doula, that the conversation involves what you believe is best in the decision making, because innately you will have a sense of what needs to happen for you. But when that's taken away, when you have no voice, when you have no choice, and if there's no voice and no choice in the birth, then it is going to possibly lead to, after the birth, thinking that you don't know what to do there either. And then we end up with postnatal depression and postnatal anxiety, and because we aren't empowered to know and trust in what feels right for us.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I wanted to say, that every birth is natural in its own beautiful way. With intervention, with cesarean, it doesn't matter. Every birth is natural. We are not robotically birthing babies. But yes, and then what you said about postpartum anxiety and depression and other issues that might occur is mainly taking and stripping away the ability, or just the competence of us being able to care for a baby. We've grown that baby, we've hosted it for 9 months, we know what to do, but we are told so many times, and we are physically being treated it may be against our voice and our choice, and it's really just spiraling down from there on.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when we are so externally focused, and there's marker points of what's normal and what we should be doing and how we should be doing it, instead of let's just quieten that out there for a minute and start to listen in here. And if you really can't hear in here, then seek out that trusted 1 or 2 people. But when you've got mum and the mum-in-law and the great aunt and the cousin and the best friend and the midwife and you've got 55 different opinions and you wonder why you're feeling a little confused, that's probably a fairly good indication of why. And it's that if we can be empowered to listen to ourselves throughout the birth, throughout the pregnancy, throughout the birth, then we're going to have a much better chance of listening within ourselves in the raising of our babies. I'm pretty passionate about this too.
Me too. Me too. I mean, it's so wonderful to talk to, Andrea. I wanted to express my deepest gratitude for today. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your intimate and insightful and powerful motherhood journey and experience. And I'm absolutely positive this will help and enlighten and give clarity to so many people who are listening or watching. So thank you. But tell us, please, what do you do? I'm pretty sure I know by now. You're so passionate, but where can people find you as well?
Yeah. So I guess my title, if you want to go with titles, I'm not really big on them, but I am a personal mentor and inspirational speaker. So I do support people in terms of sharing my own story, but also mentoring them in how they can empower themselves in any situation, whether that is in a career that's not working, a marriage that's not working, any type of crossroad that people hit. I really, really, really do my best to support them to listen within, because I believe we all have our own answers and there's nothing wrong with us. We just need to tune into what the truth is in underneath all of the white noise and the racket from out there. So what was your next question? Where people can find me? So I have a podcast that is called Comfortable in Your Own Skin. And so that can be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And also I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn under Andrea Gullick. So they're the 3 main social media sites. And then obviously my podcast, Comfortable in Your Own Skin. And primarily, if anybody resonates with what I'm saying and they feel a connection to needing a bit of support in terms of getting some clarity about their life direction, I always have an opportunity to just jump on a call and to really just delve into what's going on for them and whether I'm the right fit before we sort of work out where to from there. So there's no obligation in terms of locking into anything. But yeah, I love to hold a safe space for people to. My thing has always been, or for a very long time, people don't need help. They need love and safety, because they have all their answers. That's what I provide.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you.
No problem.
It has been.
Thank you. Well, thank you for providing the space for people to come in and share their experiences so it can support other people.
Absolutely. And that's the message I want to get out. And that was it. We're at the end of yet another amazing episode. Thank you everyone for watching. As you could see, me and Andrea could talk about this for hours on end, but we had to stop somewhere. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button now so me and you can share Andrea's story and empowerment together. If you're a mama, a health coach, a spiritual healer, or a speaker just like Andrea is, and you have a story you'd like to share with me and the rest of the world, or you know of someone who has a story they'd like to share, I can be reached either via Facebook or LinkedIn under my name, which is Viviane Shima, or via my email address, which is birthwithviviane@gmail.com. I'm excited and ready to hear from you. That is it from me for now. Stay tuned until next time. Bye.